Sup nerds, Tom here. We're going to talk about Forum Trajanum, and oh man is this game good. So if you don't know, Forum Trajanum, which is kind of hard for me to say, is a Stefan Feld game, which if you know who that is, it means it's a very point salad-y game, meaning there's a lot of strategies, a lot of different things you can do, and everything gives you points. You just need to figure out the best way to maximize the points that you're going to get. And without getting too deep into it, you kind of have this board in front of you with all these little tiles laid face down. And throughout the game, you're going to pick tiles off of them, and the way you pick them off is kind of random based on these street cards. We're going to flip out two, and that's a row or column or wherever. Then you're going to be able to pick from, and you're going to pull them up randomly. You're going to look at them. You're going to keep one and pass one to your neighbors, so a slight drafting type of thing going on there. And then from those two, you're going to pick which one you're going to get, because they all of the things that you get in the game, all of the resources and dudes that let you build and all that kind of stuff, everything comes from these tiles. So there's a decent amount of randomness in playing the hand you get. So from those two that you have, one's yours and one's an opponent gave you, you're going to pick one to trigger, and you're going to gather the resources, and then you can build stuff. There are gray buildings and colored buildings that you can build on your, I think it's called your colonia, but on your player board. So while you're pulling these tiles off to get the resources, it's random the stuff you're getting. So, there's like a few of them that are face up at the beginning of the game. But mostly, you don't know what you're going to get when you pick those up. You're pulling those off strategically so you can have spaces that you can build on. So you have a board that's covered, you're clearing it off so you can build on it. And then there's another thing where after you clear these guys off, these little dudes, they go into a pile, and you can then, depending on the type of building you build, that will allow you to then send that dude over here. I think it's seats and council. I never really get into the theme for Euro games. Like, I get it. You're trying to put theme on it, and maybe this theme works a little bit, I don't know, but I just never really get into it. But you're sending your dude over here for a bit of like an area control tile placement-y thing in the center of the table too. So you have like three major things you're doing. You're clearing off your board, you're putting tiles on the board, and then you're putting dudes over here in this area. But there's so much more to it. There are mid and end game goals to try and score to get you extra points. Some of the tiles you build, most of the tiles you're building, the colored ones and these specific gray ones, one of the specific gray ones, mostly just get you points. But some of the other gray ones, when you build them, every time you build one, you move up on a certain track that'll give you a special ability. Even with the resources that you get, which are mostly these builders and workers, or whatever you call them, of the different colors, there's a lot of ways that you can like spend two of the same color to swap it for a gray, and a lot of mitigating your luck there. These white guys, the assistants, or whatever you call them, they can be spent to either ignore a street card and take one tile from wherever you want, if you want to have a more strategic pull that turn, or you can spend two of these dudes to keep and use both of the tiles that you have instead of just keeping and using one. So while there is an awful lot of randomness in the game and playing the hand you're dealt, there are the two things that make me say, that almost isn't really that much of a factor in this game. One is those things I just talked about, that there's a lot of ways to mitigate your luck, and there's a lot of options. And furthermore, all the stuff on your board, it's all good stuff. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be stuff you want. You're not going to look at both of them and go, oh, neither of these help me. You're usually going to look at both of them and say, I want both of these. Which one can I use? And part of that is because with the whole point salad thing, yes, if you pick a strategy and focus on it, you're going to do really well. Like the last 2 games I won because I kept focusing on upgrading my scoring tile, which is a thing you can do it for the different things that you get points for at the end of the game. It will, basically upgrade that. You get more points for that same thing if you upgrade this scoring tile here. And it kind of goes, like an exponential growth on how much better it is. So yes, while those are good strategies, it's still kind of, a lot of times you'll be like, I really want to do this. But okay, let's say I didn't get that tile, but I'm looking at these tiles and I say, well, both of these other options are pretty dang good, because now I can start focusing on building up my secondary strategy or whatever. Now, the only part in this game that I didn't actually think was super detrimental. And maybe it's just because I'm still, I've only played it a few times. I'm still relatively new to the game. Is that in the drafting portion, when I have to pick one and, hand the other to my opponent, there are a lot of times when I'm really not all that worried about what I'm handing them. I mean, I think about it and I look at it, and I want to make sure, they're not one step away from getting something really good somewhere, and I hand them the thing exactly that they need. But I do kind of focus on my strategy a whole bunch more than I'm thinking about blocking my opponent, which is weird because a lot of the times I have this very big. I'm a type of player who's very conflicted between working on my own stuff versus stopping somebody else. I'm constantly looking at everybody else. Like, I don't want them to have that. I want to block them here. I'm very aggressive in that sort of way. But with so many moving parts and so many different ways that you can get points and all the special abilities, like, there is a lot going on here that it's hard for me to think about that. And when I say a lot going on here, this isn't like Lisboa level. This isn't, Feudum, Kanban, the Gallerist. Those like really, really heavy. But it's close. It's a step or two down, right? I mean, and it's all subjective. It depends on how difficult things are for you. But it's definitely more, it's heavier than, like, let's say Castles of Burgundy or Carpe Diem. It's pretty high up. Like, after the first or second round, you start to get it and it starts to make sense. But there are a lot of little nitpicky things. Like, you have all these special abilities along the side. And it is kind of, you are going to have to pull out the rule book a couple of times in your first few games to remember exactly what all of these special abilities do and how they trigger, and how the scoring works, because, well, you only need one coin per row at the end to pay your citizens or whatever they're called. But then these numbers here, these multiply the gray buildings that are in that row, but only it multiplies the different types. You have two of the same type of gray building in this row, it's not going to increase this multiplier thing or whatever. There's a lot of little nitpicky things like that. So that is one complaint I will have, is that there is a decent amount of bookkeeping, and there's a lot of stuff a lot of little things to remember. Okay, so again, as I always say, for new players, going to be a little tough. Probably my biggest complaint, though, it doesn't have anything to do with the gameplay, because outside of teaching new players, I do think the gameplay is awesome and really fun, and I have tons of fun every time I've played this, and I kind of have a high win ratio, so maybe that's a big part of it. But the biggest issue, and this is kind of true with a lot of Stefan Feld games, is the setup time is ridiculous. You have to make all these little stacks of the colors and then flip them over, because each tile, the front and back, are like different and they matter. You have all these little dudes that you got to put out here, but at setup you pull out there's three chicks here, and you got to flip and you shuffle them, and one of them is your special ability that you're starting with, and then you flip those two over and you put them diagonally adjacent to each other. Like, just a lot of little things with setup that take forever. And even, like, I always try to make, a nice table presence. Maybe you can tell, maybe you can't. But I was going to, like, set this game up. I'm like, I'm not going to set this whole game up just for this video. I'm not putting all these tiles out here. I'm not doing all that. That's going to take forever. And it does. And especially in teardown time, too. So you really need to, especially if you're playing a 4-player game, you need to be like, all right, thanks, guys. It was a great game. Everybody help clean up. Here, grab this bag. This goes in there. This goes in there. Because it can take an awful long time. One other complaint that I have, and this is really nitpicky, and actually I'm just saying this because I want to know what you guys think about this, is the rule book. It's English in the front and I think French or something in the back, right? And it's split halfway down the middle. It's fine if you want to make it easier so you don't have to print different versions of the game. You can just print different versions of the rule book, but it's all in the same rule book. Now, what I usually like is when I open up a game and it has English rules and then all the other languages, so I can get rid of those if I don't need them. And it's the minorest thing, I know. But like, okay, we need to know what this says. Oh, it's probably in the appendix, and I'll pick it up and I'll flip to the back. And I'll be like, and I have to like find the back of the middle, Again, first world problems, I know, but I wonder if that bothers anybody else. Anyways, guys, I highly recommend that you check out Forum Trajanum if you're into these pretty heavy Euros. Not the heaviest of the heavy, but pretty heavy, really point salad, lots of fun, lots of replayability, lots of different strategies you can go for. Honestly, I time permitted, it is a little bit of a long game, probably at least 2 hours, but time permitted, this is a game that I would play pretty much anytime it's offered to me. And hey, if any of what I was talking about sounds interesting to you, I'm going to put a purchase link in the description box down below. Go ahead and get yourself a copy. And hey, while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you'll never be bored.